Good afternoon. Welcome you to the second expert panel. The title of the panel is Caught in the Middle, U.S. China Competition and the Fate of American Scientists. So this panel will look into and discuss geopolitical environment as China plays important role in science and technology research and development. So this U.S.-China dynamics really impact us who are working in the STEM fields. Let me briefly introduce our moderator, Margaret Lewis, who is a professor of law at Seton Hall University. She's also an expert of U.S.-China relationship policies and who has also visited many places in Taiwan and China. And she is a long-term member of the AASF Legal Counsel. So let's welcome our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Xiaodong, and thank you to AASF and Hoover for hosting this, as well as all of you for spending your Sunday afternoon here inside on what is yet another gorgeous day in Palo Alto. So our title for this afternoon has an important word in it, and that is the "and," because we are hoping to address this bridge between what is U.S.-China competition and then what that means for scientists here in the United States. And part of this is to see what is happening in China today and what exactly is it that the U.S. sees itself as competing with, and then how the reverberations of what's happening in U.S.-China dynamics is hitting the domestic populations here. Now, of course, this is most directly felt in the STEM fields. I'll say as the law professor up here that social sciences, as came up this morning, as well as humanities are feeling the effects of U.S.-China relationship dynamics as well. So it is felt much further than just the fields usually represented in the AASF group. So the morning panel was more focused on funding. Now, we're going to take on some questions about how the competition narrative affects security policies, enforcement choices, and the environment in which researchers and cross-border collaboration is really taking place today. Of course, the experience of the China initiative, which is rightly been raised many times today and over the course of the last 3 days, still looms large. And just because it ended in 2022 does not mean it is completely in the rearview mirror. But I think in our short time this afternoon, our hope is to really focus in on what's the situation today and what might we be looking at in the future, and what policy choices should we look to. So we'll have opening round of questions, a conversation, leave some time for Q&A at the end. I do also want to say that everyone up here wears a lot of different hats, different academic institution, organizations. We are, of course, all speaking in our personal capacities, and the opinions are our own. So I am joined by three people with tremendous knowledge on the subject matter and have different perspectives. Webster is a lecturer and research scholar at Stanford's, right here, a Center for International Security and Cooperation, as well as the editor-in-chief of the fantastic resource, the DigiChina project. Chen really doesn't need an introduction, but he is the Carl Richard Soderberg Professor of Power Engineering at MIT, as well as the faculty director of the Climate Project. As a mom of kids, keep working on that climate project because, we got a lot to do. And then we have Jason Liang, two lawyers on one panel. I love it. He's the founding partner of Liang LY LLP. He represents corporate and individual clients in complex civil and criminal matters ranging from white-collar defense to cross-border disputes involving Chinese law. So we'll begin. Let's set the table a little bit. So Graham, we have the word competition, and so often U.S.-China relationship is framed in in terms of competition. And it's not like the World Cup, which I had a great time watching, where at the end of the day, you're going to have someone raising a trophy. And even if it was, I don't think the U.S. or China is going to win the World Cup anytime soon. I'm just going to go out and make that prediction too. But starting with the landscapes, where is the Chinese leadership pushing hardest in STEM? And how do these sort of winning and losing narratives align with the reality that you're seeing?
Yeah, so it's a really good question to start out with, because there's often an assumption that there's just this, one versus the other full-blown, comprehensive competition between the United States and China. And certainly, even if almost anybody who sits and thinks about it will realize that it's more complicated than that, this is the shorthand that slips into media and policy discussions so many times. And so when you look at what the Chinese government is working on, I think there's basically two fundamental motivators that you can hold as the groundwork. One is basically the economy. If you're sitting in the Communist Party and Chinese government headquarters right now, the biggest concern that you're having is that in broad terms, people are very unhappy with the economy in China. Many people, there's underemployment and unemployment for people at all levels. There's concern about the future with an aging population and the ability to provide services for elders. There's these really basic legitimacy shaping concerns that the Chinese government has. And so there's an effort to apply new technologies and scientific breakthroughs to these problems. And so we hear about things like, well, it's not just AI adoption and developing the fanciest model, but the government's watchword is AI plus. How can they combine new machine learning techniques and systems with different industrial and social problems to upgrade? They've even begun to talk about data as a factor of production, bringing it into the language of the party and the state rhetoric. At the same time, with this economic and sort of serve the people thing very much in the center, there's also a huge amount of effort to modernize the military, defensive and offensive systems. And so we see things that are a little harder to study because they're a little more closed, but there's been a great deal of effort put into upgrading the nuclear forces and missile forces and these types of things. So there is a push across the economy to upgrade and really to serve those basic dilemmas of security. And for the Chinese Communist Party, the top lines of security are basically prosperity for the people and national defense. And how does this actually reflect, the idea of competition that we hear in the United States? I think, one observation that I'll make is that the Chinese official rhetoric and discourse has for a long time seen the United States and the Western world as a competitor. And there have been decades of discourse about developing universities and research centers and talent and companies and industries, in order to catch up in some cases, and then hopefully to compete or even, get more advanced than competitors. I think the United States has been a little bit late to the game of being conscious of the idea that somebody else, whether it's China or anybody else, would be a real competitor across a number of science and technological fields. So in the United States, as that consciousness has become, it's unavoidable. There are advancements elsewhere in the world, and certainly China's chief among them for many industries. And the United States sees just the presence of excellence and competitive firms and researchers as sort of a challenge to the idea of comprehensive U.S. leadership. The hard part is to figure out where this is actually a problem for the United States. And I think that it's a real strategic issue in certain defense areas, but in some other areas, perhaps it's simply okay that in the constellation of expertise across the world, some of the top people in labs are in China. So, we could talk more about it there, but I think that's what I would start with, is that especially in the United States, the discourse is challenged by coming late to the realization that we are not an unquestioned number one in the United States forever in every field. And sometimes that's, yes, worth competing for, and sometimes it's just fine. It's how it's going to be.
No, so Gong, I mean, not only are you deep in your labs at MIT, which are really cool, by the way, but you go Germany, Japan, Hong Kong, you're all over the place. So I'm curious sort of how do Graham's observations and what's going on outside the U.S., particularly in China, Hong Kong, track with what you've observed, and then bringing it back home, how do you view the current climate in the United States for researchers, and particularly people of Chinese descent?
Yeah, last year I spent a sabbatical whole year. I spent 6 months in Japan and 3 months in Hong Kong and 3 months in Germany, and really learned a lot. So let me just first say that the competition, we say go Bears here, right? And there are competition between Berkeley and Stanford, and then from the East Coast, there are competition between MIT and Stanford. Stanford is a common enemy, it seems. But say they, yes, we can come here to understand that, right? So I think we are so used to, we're so proud of being competition, but we're not trying to kill our enemy, right? We're without the Stanford, without Berkeley, and if only MIT, I don't think academia will thrive. And so of course, Graham has a lot more insights on this really the different level, industrial level competition between U.S. and China. I would say that the way I say industry there, of course, different sectors. One can think about, say, electrical vehicles, semiconductor, all this. But also the infrastructure, right? In talk about infrastructure, we're not just talking about energy. We're talking about supply chain, and then there's also infrastructure for innovation and innovation ecosystems. This is where I would say the U.S. Traditionally. We really had a lot of advantage, but the way I say here is we're destroying our own advantage. We're just as Professor Steve Chiu would say that we're not just shooting into our feet, we're shooting into close to our head somewhere. So of course, personally, looking into the impact community, right? Overall, we heard in the morning the science and the universities are under attack. And among these groups, because the U.S. China, at least the competition, let's say, using this word, the researchers in U.S. are particularly living under crossfire. And this has created a lot of fears in the community. And I think there are a few areas. One is, of course, the national policy area, right? China Initiative is the most visible example. And of course, I was, a victim of the initiative. And but say, even though China Initiative had terminated, officially was terminated, in February 2022, and we saw the continuous effort by the Congress to bring it back in different forms, right? Sometimes directly under, say, in the form China Initiative, sometimes is in different names. Over past few years, I now working with AASF, we have defeated at least 5 or 6 times of this effort trying to bring China Initiative back. And for many of the researchers, students, professors, researchers here, just think about the working under this suspicion. it's almost like working under gunpoint. Everything you do, it could be suspicious. And so in addition to this policy, then we have, say, pretty much a lot of harassment on campus, going across borders. I have a faculty member, because now people tell me all their stories. A faculty member has been visited by FBI almost every year, a few times. And he said, I remember last year, he said one day FBI finally told him, okay, you're clear. And we're not going to bother you again. And a few months later, the agent left, and he was contacted again, right? And you sort of fear that you're constantly under this watch. And third point is the implicit and explicit bias. Because of the policy, because of the national policy, the rules, the grants, this will translate in hiring, right? Faculty hiring. If I'm a department head, I will ask if I hire this faculty member, will she be able to get funding? Right? There are a lot of funding now have restrictions in terms of looking into your records, and also graduate students recruiting. I can say that even just from say the statistics from our own department, in the past, first the overall funding decrease. Right? MIT already have a public statement. We saw a 20% reduction. And that was reflected in our graduate students. In the past, we have about 100 students coming in, 80 to 100 graduate students coming in. And this year we have 60. And in the past, we have probably somewhere between 40 to 50% international students. And this year, when I counted, and directly coming from abroad, is out of 60, is 8 out of 60. This is, and I can say that one directly came from China. There are some other students studying in U.S. and say of Chinese origin, I can say from names. But one directly from China, one from Taiwan, and 2 from India, 2 from Korea, and 2 from Europe. We are not just losing talents from China. We're losing talents from around the world. And this is also a message when I was doing the sabbatical, right? And say in Germany, and my lab from Berkeley said, I don't come to US anymore, right? And I guess all these rules is really, the competition is a talent. At the end, there's a talent competition. And thinking about the discussion we had in the morning, I just imposed one question. If we don't have the universities in US anymore, can we still attract the people? That's, I think, I'll just stop here.
Yeah, no, it's when you think about this morning's the conversations with Karen Korematsu and Mike Honda and the questioning of loyalty, and in your case, when the U.S. attorney flat out said this is about loyalty, and you see I teach in Asian and Americans in the law course, and the themes of the perpetual foreigner, coming up and again. And you don't need a China initiative, though, to charge someone with false statements or FARA. And Jason, you're dealing with these cases every day. And so if you can give us a sense of where you see, even if laws are not necessarily changing, where are the enforcement priorities of the government today? And how is that playing out in the actual cases that you're seeing coming into your door?
I think at the end of the day, what you all feel are largely kind of played out by government enforcement priorities. Even though the China initiative officially ended in 2022, the enforcement priorities have just simply shifted, right? Like if you look at Pam Bondi's memo coming out of her when she was still in office in 2025, nowhere is it listed that there's going to be a China initiative, that they're going to focus on academics. But you see the focus is still on foreign competition, trade, tariff, import fraud. You have focus on Medicare fraud, other areas of fraud, transnational organizations. And what that really translates into is now Homeland Security will have greater funding in terms of investigating tax fraud, tariff fraud. You have more focus and scrutiny of the materials that are coming in. Companies that are doing business within the United States but may be based abroad. You have greater scrutiny of what transpires within the nation. And then there is in that particular memo within the National Security Division, what they have said is that we're going to transition away from using criminal law as the primary tool to enforce FARA, which is the Foreign Agent Registration Act. 951, Title 18, United States Code, Section 951. It's not part of any act, but it's a law that's been on the books for almost 100 years. We're going to transition away from it, and that is in name what the DOJ policy is. But in practice, it is still a very dangerous area, because if you look at these statutes, 951, Section 951 under Title 18, just give you guys an example. All the government has to prove is that you have a U.S. person, a person subject to the U.S. jurisdiction in the United States, taking an act, any act. That act could be lawful, that act could be unlawful, it could be constitutionally protected, whatever it may be, doing something in the United States, but at the direction or control of a foreign government, being an agent of the foreign government. That's what that means, without prior registration to the United States, the U.S. Attorney General. If you meet these 4 criteria, then you are technically in violation of Section 951. There are a number of exceptions, but those exceptions are narrowly construed. And that penalty carries with it the nomenclature of being a foreign agent, almost like a scarlet letter that's wrapped around you forever, right? Secondly, a 10-year penalty. You can go to jail for 10 years under the statute. And if you were to break that down and understand what that truly means in your day-to-day life, all that is required, and you look at some of the cases, is somebody asking you for a favor, and that's someone being affiliated with, be it the Chinese government, the Korean government, the Japanese government. They can be a consular official. They can be a dignitary from a foreign nation asking you for a simple favor that would not raise an alarm bell in your head or any other American's head. But the fact that you are taking their direction and you are doing that means you're in violation of the law and you can potentially be prosecuted. And what that means is, at the end of the day, we are at the mercy of the government and the prosecutor in terms of prosecutorial discretion, right? It's like speeding. You're never always going to get ticketed when you speed on the freeway. Everyone speeds. That doesn't mean everyone is gonna pay a fine. It's up to the cop to see who they pull over and who they ticket on that particular day. That's what that means. And if that is what that means, then we owe it to ourselves to educate ourselves about what these laws mean, put them into proper context, and to be able to be vigilant about guarding ourselves against it, because at the end of the day, there is always going to be a difference of views between the folks in this room, the folks at this university, and the folks across the universities across the nation and the world, and the government. And I don't care which government. We use the word competition between the United States and China. That word, though, is not always the word that we would use in this context. It used to be collaboration, right? And the idea that scientists, researchers, professors, academics want to create a better world, and I talk to them day in and day out, their idea is that we want to collaborate because more collaboration means better results, more accurate results, and the world is better. The country, though, looks at it differently. And when you always have that conflicting view, you're always going to run into that dynamic. And I think I'll stop here.
Yeah, no, and we've got a lot out there. And one thing that strikes me is in some ways some of these laws are 100 years old, right? They've really been around a long time. And one of the themes for people who've been here the last few days, of course, that it's AI. What's the frontier and what's happening now? And love AI because it helps me do everything from my kids' soccer pools to carpools. But for each of you to sort of think about how does AI play into this? So on the one hand, we're hearing a lot, those of us who are not STEM people, about the open models coming from China, Kimi, K3, GLM, whatever number we're on, and how different that is than the more proprietary models in the US, which does raise questions about protecting intellectual property. And there is a role for law in that, including criminal law. So maybe kind of from each of your perspectives, first of all, Grant, what is going on with China AI, and are the headlines in the U.S. a lot of noise, or is there actually something that who's getting it right, explaining what's happening in China with AI, and to what extent is that something that should be worrisome, especially for the U.S.'s at this point somewhat different approach? Where does the law play into it? And Gang, if you could maybe say a little bit about how you see when you were in Hong Kong or wherever, and what are, if not AI, what other frontier technologies maybe is the U.S. lagging behind, as well as this point about it's not just about creating the technology, it's taking it to market and what you do from the lab to actually getting out into the commercial space. I don't know if you want to kick off.
Yeah, it's a really tough thing to untangle, and whether I like it or not, I now spend a huge amount of my time in the AI race or AI competition discourse. I'll just say a couple of things. One is, if you want to look at competition in something like AI between two countries, you have a bunch of defining to do. AI doesn't mean anything in specific unless you say what it means. And when the Chinese government put out an AI development plan in 2017, it didn't mean large language models. It meant various types of deep learning and pattern matching, and computer vision was coming up, and it was just a different paradigm. They did go and build a bunch of university programs and both private and government-backed labs over that period of time. And then once LLMs became a practical reality and really captured the imagination after the release of ChatGPT, a huge amount of effort in China went into trying to build something like this. There was a discourse online and in some meetings that I was at in China where it's like, why didn't China build this? We spent all this energy on trying to do that, and people in that field know that among the joke is that U.S. China AI competition is Chinese versus Chinese. It's just the Chinese working in the U.S. labs and the Chinese working in the Chinese ones. Now, I will say in defense of the best of the United States, it's Chinese and everybody else in the U.S. labs, and largely Chinese in the Chinese labs. But it's a highly integrated community. So if you're just talking about people advancing this technology, ideas and people are moving across the borders. People go to Stanford and MIT and Carnegie Mellon and then start labs all over. But what China's been doing is a number of companies have put out open weight models, meaning they can be downloaded and used on infrastructure freely, rather than the closed API access that you see from the major US labs. And currently, the capability gap isn't all that big. You can say there's a few things that you can do with the US labs, the US models that you can't do with the Chinese offered ones. So that's a lead that you can understand to exist that certain labs have over others. But there's also a bunch of things that you can only do with an open model that you can download onto your own infrastructure as a company or a government or a researcher, and that you just simply can't do because you can't touch it and fine tune it and adapt it with a closed model. So there's also an edge of what is being made possible by the Chinese labs that's not being made possible by the US ones. So I just see this all as a very integrated, multifarious technological advancement story that doesn't have clear runaway leaders, even though US policy from the Biden administration really tried with the chip controls targeting China were about trying to make sure that the US maintains a strong lead in whatever AI was to hold in the next few years. And right now the jury's out. It doesn't look like a definite win.
Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I think I'm lagging behind using AI, and the only thing I use is ChatGPT. I don't have an agent. But say, I guess I can say yesterday we heard about the different layer stacks for AI, and then the bottom is energy, and that's where China really has advantage. And also from the story coming online, right? It's not just a chip; it's how you you do your computation, your algorithm. So, but I do want to say on a broader perspective, right? And I was in Hong Kong for 3 months, and with a few companies, few universities in mainland China. I give you one example. I visited CATL, CATL, and I think they have over 50% of the world battery market, EM, right? And the production line I visited was their first production line. And they recently renovated, and they are producing 5 gigawatt hour production, annual production, out of the oldest production line they had. And what I learned from is that when they gave Elon Musk presentation, half-hour presentation, and Elon Musk scripted or his plan to buy from Korea, and bought their production line and brought back to U.S. And this production line is two generations. So this is one point I want to give one example. And the other example is, say, I visited a lot of this incubation hubs, and one of the very famous, let's say, the entrepreneur, and he set up a lot, all the, say, different incubators in China, and had over 100. He started over 100 companies, and had a lot of data there. And they say, with this data, he know they are 10 times faster and 10 times cheaper than US, right? So, and also finally I want to say, this is the infrastructure, supply chain. And this is not just for industry. It's impacting the research. And I give you one example. I have a friend, and he was a professor in US before, and he had the idea to make a SEM in open air. And he said he wrote many times proposals, he couldn't get funding. And then he went to Hong Kong and he got funding. And he went to a company in Beijing, electronics, say SEM, or electron microscope company. And they made it work in 2 years. And by the time, 3 months later, I went there, he showed me the first image. 3 months later, he said, already have second generation. What I'm telling you is this fast iteration, the supply chain is impacting the fundamental research. And they can do faster and cheaper. I see the logistics of all this is, I don't think the policy will work. I'm sorry, the US policy, it won't work. And it's going to fundamentally hurt the US. And Elon Musk is doing smart thing. This is the thing that China did since the 1980s. Bring the company from US, from around the world, and digest, and doing better. Why US can't do the same? Why US cannot learn, right? And this competition, you also learn from your competitors, right? But see, at the end, it's working together. You can't beat it. When you can't beat your opponent, you become friends. MIT and Stanford are friends. Berkeley and Stanford are friends, right? There are different ways of friendly competition. So that's what I saw there.
I mean, I was struck when I was in Hong Kong this summer, too, by the whole Dawanchu and how you had Hong Kong and Shenzhen and integrated in a way that, it's so much change. But any good news on how we're dealing with enforcement priorities? Because there is a role for criminal law in protecting this. And where is that? Where's the sweet spot, maybe?
There is. I mean, at the end of the day, I think there we have, we as lawyers, we as policymakers or lawmakers have a model that would allow AI to progress in the US in a way that could be faster. Because it's not the first time. Technology has moved faster and faster, and it has improved in ways that for those of you who are truly the young folks in the next generation in this room, you can't imagine. Like, I was born in the 80s. To me, digital media wasn't a thing. We worked with tapes, cassette tapes, and tapes that we had to rewind before we returned it to Blockbuster and the likes. Not sure how many people in here still remember those days, and how many people don't understand a thing that I'm talking about. Computer media used to be on hard disks that we call floppy disks that were either the size of a paper or about a piece of plastic this big. As we progressed into the late 90s and early 2000s, physical media transitioned to digital media in its earliest form. And at that point in time, the law, like it always does, plays catch up. It wasn't ready for it. The industry wasn't ready for it. And you had the music recording industry of America and the movie industry of America going around the country filing lawsuits against IP addresses for those folks that were in college at the time downloading music. And they were trying to get a few $1,000s out of each individual. They had brought criminal prosecutions and investigations into peer-to-peer file sharing platforms to try to curb the development of MP3s, digital files that were being transferred. And by the way, you know who the biggest offenders of providing for access to those media files and transfer files and illegal downloads? Every university across the country, because it was college students with access to T1 internet, with access to high-speed internet at the time, which wasn't universal across the nation, being able to download files for the first time. And that took us about 10 years to figure out. But now that we figured that out, how many of you actually buy CDs, buy tapes, buy discs anymore? It's all done through Apple TV. It's all done through Amazon. It is all done through whatever digital library that you have. And so that is to say, we have now a working model of how to take archaic laws that protects your intellectual property and balance it against the emerging technology and allow the right holders to still benefit and exploit their rights for financial gain, and allow technology to prosper in a way that will allow us to benefit from the increase in technology. And I was just talking about this topic with a Chinese AI company who is getting sued in the United States because of alleged infringement of character rights, because they were allowed to make movies or derivative works of, say, like Star Wars or any other movies, right? And the idea of going to Capitol Hill, hiring a law firm or hiring a group to go to them and say, we need legislation that will get ahead of the slow-moving courts, allow us to leverage our technology, but leverage it right and benefit from it and make a business out of it, is something that all of these tech companies should be considering, because looking at how we transitioned from tapes, CDs, to MP3s or digital movies, that is a model that the AI industry can follow. And we can get ahead of it and shortcut it.
I'm so old. I was born before the original Star Wars came out, so I'm just going to claim the UNC title. So just thinking, I had soccer earlier, and we're hearing lots of own goals by the United States, at least when it comes to this. But I also watch a lot of the other football. I'm very excited that football season is starting soon, and American football is unusual that you really have a clear offense and defense. Teams that that people take the fields at different times. And if we are, I'm putting on my sort of American hat, that if you do want to have a robust research and manufacturing, this like STEM ecosystem being really strong in the future, it does take both the offense, putting in resources and getting the talent, as well as defense, figuring out when there is a legitimate intellectual property violation or a legitimate issue where someone is indeed a foreign agent and hasn't registered and is operating within the sovereign territory of another country. But to try to find some positive things here, if each one of you had a magic wand and could put into place one new policy or law or some sort of concrete change, and that would actually be listened to and actualized in DC. What do you think is something that could be and should be done to keep the U.S. being really at the forefront and having that thriving STEM fields in the future? I don't know if we want to start from the other side with Gang. What would be your wish?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. We discuss a lot within ASF what kind of recommendations when we talk to government about protecting U.S. research. I think the model is already there. In NASA, their TRR, technology readiness level, right? And if you are the basic research, right? If you fund the project, right? Because this is a technology readiness level, their definition, level 1, you just have an idea, and level 2, so until level 10. And you can classify your research project at what TRL level. You say above this level, you can do the these things, right? So that with that will be much clearer. Say in terms of what you can do, what you cannot do. Nowadays, with all this ambiguity, nobody wants to have any interactions with any other countries. We're at the end hurting ourselves. And there is in DoD, there's already a model like that because they say 6.1, 6.2, 6.3 money, right? 6.1 is very fundamental research. And the fundamental research, just leave it open. If you have that clarity, it's much easier to follow.
What would you do?
Well, I think if I could change anything is to get this country back to its founding principles, which is give me your poor, give me your hungry, and your starving masses. This country, the United States of America, to me, represents truly the land of opportunity, that no other nation that I know of will take in a first-generation immigrant straight from another nation, and within a generation or two, and have them fill an auditorium like this. And within a generation or two of them establishing a foothold in this country to really actualize their true potential. And that to me is the greatest value of this country. And if I can see us get back to the point where we have our arms open and we have a welcoming place, I'm not afraid of competition. I'm not afraid of this country's ability to stand up against foreign competitors and say we are the best, because by attracting the best and the brightest from overseas and developing them domestically, we will always stand tall. The one caveat I will say is knowing that I do not have the power to make that a reality. What I will say is, from an enforcement perspective, for those who are working in the academic field, rely on the university's general counsel's office and ensure that you have full and complete and candid disclosures. And as long as you have that, don't matter how many times the alphabet soup agencies come knocking at your door, you can always go back and force your university to stand behind you. And when that happens, you don't have to be afraid.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I want to associate myself with both of my co-panelists' answers on this. If I wanted U.S. science and technology development to be stronger, I think a lot of what would be best would be to undo some certain changes, whether it's funding or treatment of people from outside the United States over the last few years. I do want to say one thing on the way that, to protect certain, things that might be at risk and also to enable innovation. There's something that really struck me on a recent trip to China, and I was talking to a policy professor who was, I was trying to learn about some of the policy ideas that they're implementing around AI development and governing what can be done with AI models and services online. And a lot of them seem like a pretty significant compliance burden. And certainly they are. I mean, they have to build censorship technologies and monitoring and all sorts of things that would be incompatible with a lot of the ideals that we hold dear in the United States for the most part. But the good part of those policies is that it has made it clear for Chinese labs and companies what they need to do. As Gong was saying, if they simply know what they need to do to be in the clear, where the lines are, then that allows these Chinese entrepreneurs to navigate what could be a very scary regulatory environment for them. So if you look at what that might look like in the United States, it's comprehensive data governance laws. We're just riding on, I mean, I'm not a lawyer here, but we're riding on some old laws and a big pile of case law and a heck of a lot of unknowns about what's okay with data. That works from national security sensitive data to personal information and the privacy of your home and your devices to what might become of the various surveillance systems that cities are putting in, reflecting what we've been seeing in China over the last couple of decades. So I think that if the US can legislate in a way that puts that question of how to protect core interests to the Congress and to the people, and then actually do it. I mean, I'm asking the Congress to function, so it's a little crazy, but it would be nice, and I think it would actually enable people to operate without as much fear.
So they haven't stopped us yet. I know we're waiting for some people to come. So I think we'll take just maybe 2 questions, one from each mic, if anyone wants to jump up there. And we're going to have to make sure they're really brief and one single question, no subparts. But yes, go ahead. We'll take both mics, and then we'll just whoever wants to answer.
Thank you, Lou. So, Mr. Webster, this question for you. So I do work in emerging technology and cross-border capital, and I have also served in the U.S. Army. In U.S. China tech competition, what practical tests should investors and companies use to distinguish a genuine national security risk from legitimate scientific collaboration?
Quick question. Yeah, we'll take another question. Okay. So you have 30 seconds to think how to answer that one. Yeah. Go ahead.
So yeah, hi, my name is Mohammed. It's a pleasure to hear your panel discussion. So the question is about free speech for Jason. How do you define free speech, and each individual and yourself, when you are in different occasions, what criteria people should follow to make sure they have their free speech at the same time, based on those criteria, knowing the law, probably they are safe. The criteria that guarantee you are safe and you have your free speech right.
Okay, great. National security and free speech, small issues.
All right,
go for it.
We should be able to take that.
Yeah.
To handle that pretty easily. So it's a really good question. I'm going to have to dodge it slightly because I've never been an investor, so I don't know exactly what you need to worry about as an investor. But what I will say is that the call on whether something is a genuine national security risk versus a safe area for collaboration is hard, and it's a judgment call, and it has to do with predicting the future, right? So I think if you're navigating as a business person or as a researcher, you're in a space that's not about what is the answer, what's the real answer to the question. It's about what do the regulators or the others who might be looking at me for enforcement actions worry about. And if you're an investor too, like what might markets do? That's the part that I truly have to swear off of. But I think the risk calculus is not, unfortunately, it's not an objective look at what the risk is. It's what will the risk be perceived as, and what might it be if there's a difference in the electoral outcomes in a couple of years, that type of thing. So yeah, probably hire expensive consultants and lawyers, but not too many of them.
Yeah. Last answer, Jason. Yeah.
So wait, I'm sorry, which question?
Just go ahead. That's the First Amendment.
The First Amendment question. And so with respect to the First Amendment is a right that's developed. And we like to understand our rights as if they were frozen in time, as if our understanding of these rights are what they are today, from beginning of time to now. If you were to look into the history of the First Amendment, you'll see that that jurisprudence, that set of laws, didn't start to develop until the early 1900s. That means for almost 100 years, 150 years, this nation ignored that particular right, by and large. That said, your rights are going to be protected given the contours of whatever it is today. There's restrictions, time, place, manner restrictions to your First Amendment free speech rights. None of that's going to be curbed by the current trend of prosecution by the U.S. government in the sense that you need to be concerned about, because they're not coming in to punish you. Now, what they are looking at is whether or not your speech is truly your speech versus are you the surrogate speaker for some other bad actor or some foreign government actor, right? And if you're speaking on behalf of a foreign government on a belief that is not genuinely yours because you want to say it, then you are in the territory of violating 18 U.S.C. 951. And if you were to marry the two concepts, you'll see how murky that is. And it's difficult to traverse. How do I prove a speech is mine, an opinion is mine? And it's expensive to prove, especially in the United States, because the wheels of justice not only turn slowly, but it burns money like no other, right? And that is one of the things you always have to consider. What I always say to everyone who is concerned about that is what you want to do is before you do anything, if you're a researcher at a university, if you are a professor or a grad student, disclose to your chair, disclose to your dean, the head of your department, your affiliations. When you go speak, make sure they're aware that you're participating. And if there is a question that they can't answer, ask them to elevate it to the general counsel's office. And what happens there is you've now created a paper trail that you can point to say, I try to be compliant, I try to seek guidance, and here's the guidance I received, and no one said I had to register. That protects you. And that also forces the university to stand behind you when there is an issue, because all too often, especially during the China initiative phase, what we saw was the second the DOJ came knocking, the university said, I'm complying with my obligations by cooperating with the department, and I'm going to throw the academic under the bus. There's only one university that I know of that did the right thing, and that was MIT. Okay? Of all the universities.
So, I mean, actually a great note. So yes, go MIT. But I do want to say that I'm Columbia and NYU, so I'm not in that fight. But I do want to say that of all the bad news, that as a lawyer and a law professor and someone who does human rights and criminal justice, it has been a joy and a pleasure to integrate into the STEM fields. And I do think that AASF is just doing a tremendous job of building those coalitions. But with that, I need to hand it back to our chair to pass us off to the next.
Yeah, due to time limits, so we have to stop this session. And let's give another round of applause to the panel.
Oh, okay.